Ethan Crowley never forgot the look in that little Apache girl's eyes, wide, hungry, and filled with a quiet kind of fear that didn't belong on the face of any child. It was a cold morning in Dry Creek, the kind that steals warmth from your bones. Ethan had been hauling grain sacks behind his old barn when he found her standing there, barefoot, shivering, and clutching an empty woven basket, as if it were her last hope in the world. He'd seen hunger before, but this was something else, hunger, that had carved shadows into her cheeks and taken away the shine in her eyes. And in that moment, without thinking twice, Ethan made a promise he wasn't even sure he could afford to keep. "I'll feed you, every day, as long as you need." He didn't know her name. He didn't know where she had come from. He only knew that she needed help, and that was enough. Before we continue this powerful story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Inspiring Echoes, where every story reminds us that kindness still matters. For weeks, Ethan left a small bundle of food, bread, beans, dried corn, on a rock near the edge of his property. And every morning it disappeared. No thanks, no footprints, no sign of who collected it. But he didn't need thanks. He kept leaving the food because the promise had come from his heart, not from any hope of reward. Others in town warned him. "You're feeding trouble," they said. "The Apache don't forget debts, and they don't forget threats either." But Ethan shrugged off every word. "A child's a child," he'd reply. "Hungry is hungry." Still, there was more going on than he realized, because that little girl wasn't just any child. She was the daughter of the tribe's Nantan, a respected leader known simply as Greyhawk, a man who had seen too much war and lost too many people to trust outsiders easily. And yet his daughter had wandered into town starving, after their winter supplies ran dangerously low. And the only man who helped her was the one man the tribe had never expected, a humble farmer with calloused hands and a heart far bigger than his small piece of land. Spring arrived late that year. Too late. The rains didn't come. The crops withered, and Dry Creek, once a proud little town, began to starve. Ethan did everything he could, rationed his food, shared what he had left, even gave up his own meals to keep his neighbors fed. But desperation was settling in. People whispered about leaving. Some talked about violence. Others simply cried quietly at night. Then, one morning, just as the sun rose over the barren fields, Ethan heard a rumble, a low rolling thunder that didn't sound like storms or horses. He stepped outside, confused. What he saw made him drop to his knees. A line of Apache riders stretching farther than he could see, moving toward Dry Creek with wagons piled high, corn, beans, dried meat, blankets, even herbs and medicines. At the front was Greyhawk himself, and beside him, riding, proudly on a small paint horse, was the little girl Ethan had fed through the winter. Her hair was braided with bright ribbons. Her cheeks were full now, and she was smiling, shy but strong. Greyhawk dismounted, walked up to Ethan and placed a hand over his heart. "You fed one of ours," he said softly. "Today we feed all of yours." The tribe didn't just bring enough food for a day or a week. They brought enough for the entire season. They taught the townsfolk how to restore the land, how to plant differently, how to read the wind and soil. Apache hunters brought fresh meat every morning. Apache women shared recipes and medicines. Apache children played with Dry Creek's children, as if they'd always been one community. The town survived, not because of luck, but because one man kept a promise to a hungry child, and that child carried his kindness back to her, people who returned it 100-fold. Months later, Ethan stood on his porch, watching the little girl run across the field with the other children of Dry Creek. She waved at him, laughing, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt hope rise like warm sunlight in his chest. He realized something powerful that day. Kindness doesn't disappear. It travels. It multiplies. It comes back to you when you least expect it and when you need it most. The peace between Dry Creek and the Apache tribe didn't happen overnight. At first it was careful, quiet, like two worlds testing whether they could stand close without breaking apart. But for Ethan, that fragile bridge between them began with a single unexpected visitor. It was the little Apache girl, now healthy, braided, confident, walking up his dusty front path with a small pouch in her hands. Ethan froze mid-step, a tin cup of coffee still warm in his grip. She had never come this close before. She stopped at the bottom of his porch steps, clutching that pouch like it held something sacred. "My father sent this," she said gently. Her English was soft but steady now. Ethan sat down on the top step, trying not to overwhelm her with his presence. "What's your name?" he asked finally. She hesitated, then said the word like a quiet breeze. "Alata." "It means little son." She placed the pouch beside him and backed away respectfully. Inside were dried berries, sweet, rare, carefully chosen. A thank you gift. Not in words, but in the Apache way. And that moment, simple as it was, became the spark that changed everything. Life in Dry Creek slowly shifted. Apache hunters and townsfolk repaired old fences together. Women from both sides traded recipes and remedies. Children who once stared at each other from a distance now built mud forts by the creek and raced horses, barefoot through the tall grass. But not everyone was ready to accept this new peace, especially Marshal Tom Hargrove, a man who believed order came only through fear, and that alliances were just another word for danger. He rode up to Ethan's farm one evening, dust swirling behind his boots. "You've started something you can't control," the marshal warned. "These people don't forget old wounds." Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "They also don't forget kindness," he replied softly. "And maybe that's something this town's forgotten." The marshal scoffed and rode off. But something about Ethan's words lingered in the air, like a truth no one wanted to admit. 3 days later, the twist came, quietly at first. A trader wagon rolled into Dry Creek carrying news. A gang of outlaws had been spotted raiding settlements just 30 miles south. Ruthless men. Hungry men. The kind that didn't care who they took from or who they hurt. The town panicked. They had food again, but not enough weapons. Not enough fighters. Not enough time. Ethan found himself standing in the center of town, watching fear spread like wildfire. And then, in the distance, a faint drumbeat echoed across the plains. Slow, steady, growing louder. People stepped outside. Children climbed onto porches. Even the marshal rose from his seat, eyes narrowing. From the horizon, a long line of Apache riders appeared, led by Greyhawk himself. But this time, they weren't carrying supplies. They carried arms. War paint, determination. Greyhawk rode straight into the town square, dismounted, and faced Ethan with the seriousness of a man who had spent a lifetime protecting his people. "We have heard of the raiders," he said, "and we will not let your children starve again. Your kindness fed one child. Now we stand ready to protect them all." The townsfolk stared, stunned. The marshal took a step forward, unsure whether to argue or bow. But Alata, little son, slipped down from her father's horse, walked right up to Ethan and placed her small hand in his. She looked around at the townspeople and said, "We are friends. Friends stand together." And in that single moment, anger eased, fear softened, and Dry Creek realized something that would shape its future. Kindness wasn't a weakness. It was a shield, a force, a bridge between worlds that once saw only enemies. That night, as Apache warriors set up watch posts around the edges of Dry Creek, Ethan stood beneath the stars, feeling something he hadn't felt since childhood. Safety, unity, family, beyond blood. He didn't know what tomorrow's danger would bring, but he knew one thing for certain. The promise he made to a starving child had grown into something powerful enough to protect an entire town, and Dry Creek, for the first time in its history, was not standing alone.